Okay, to start the program today, everyone, please give a warm welcome. It's CHPC's board chair, Richard Roberts.
Welcome to New York. It's been waiting for you. Welcome to New York. Welcome to New York.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome for you all for being here. Really appreciate you coming. We have I'm told we have a record turnout for the room, and so we really appreciate it. Thank you. I think, as all of you in the room know, producing affordable housing has gotten to be harder than ever, and it's a real testimony to all of the commitment, all of your commitment that you're here with us, and you're continuing to do this important work. We really appreciate it. And speaking of appreciation, I want to take a moment before we start the program to thank our sponsors. Your support and the support of all of you in the room today is so instrumental to supporting CHPC and its work and our involvement in the affordable housing landscape here in New York City. Special thanks and a huge shout out to our lead sponsor, Trinity Financial. And our name badge sponsors, M&T Bank and RDC Development, the folks at MDG and Wavecrest. Thank you very much. We also want to thank the foundations who support our ongoing work throughout the year, and you'll see them listed on the screen there. Thank you very much, foundations. And we really appreciate the attendance of so many important folks, particularly folks in government. Before we get to to some of the names that I've been asked to acknowledge, if you work at HPD, currently work at HPD or the New York State, one of the New York State housing agencies or HDC, please stand. NYCHA as well, please stand. Thank you. So those of you who are working on projects, you now know who you can go to and annoy. I understand we're joined by Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer, who's no stranger to the housing world, is the Deputy Mayor here. Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. Council Member and Chair of the Land Use Committee of the City Council, Rafael Salamanca, who we'll hear from later. Councilmember Gail Brewer. We'll also hear from our Chief Housing Officer, Jessica Katz. Commissioner Carrion, is he here? Please stand. That's the good-looking guy, brown skin, no hair. No, look here. No, okay, Commissioner Carrion, thank you. Commissioner Wisnauskas from New York State. I saw the head of ESDC, Hope Knight, here earlier. Hope Knight. And I know there's so many others. And making housing and neighborhood work requires the work of everyone in this room, and we're just grateful that we could all be here and evidence our collaboration and the fact that we're all working together. I'd also like to thank the great CHPC board. If the CHPC board could stand, please. They're like 100 of you. Thank you. Samantha Magistro, where are you? Over here? The chair of our Luncheon Committee, Samantha. And I want to particularly thank the CHPC board. We had a small group that formed a search committee and worked collaboratively to identify our new executive director. And They were leading an exhaustive search, and we really were delighted to identify a new leader who has a deep understanding of research and data, an encyclopedic knowledge of the field, and someone who will really truly put us at the forefront, the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of everything that's happening in affordable housing. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our new Executive Director, ChatGPT.
Hello, world.
Oh, is that it? Okay. ChatGPT, what would you say is the most important issue for housing in New York City today?
The most important issue for housing in New York City today is the affordable housing crisis, which is exacerbated by rising housing costs and stagnant incomes for low and middle income households.
Oh, okay, pretty good. Okay, ChatGPT, tell us your vision for housing and planning in New York City.
As an AI language model, I do not have personal opinions or a vision, but I can provide information and insights on various aspects of housing and planning in New York City based on available data and research.
Okay, that was kind of unsatisfying. All right, let me try something a little different. ChatGPT, what do you see the New York State Legislature doing next in the field of housing?
As an AI language model, I don't have access to up-to-date information, so I cannot predict what issue the New York State Legislature will address next.
Okay. All right. Let's try this a little differently. Who's in favor of hearing from an actual human candidate? All right. Okay. So.
Nay.
Oh, ChatGPT's not for it. Okay. All right. So, in all seriousness, let me introduce our real executive director. Howard Slatkin joined us in January, but he is someone familiar to CHPC and to many of you here. He's had a hand in many of the biggest housing policy innovations in the city in the past couple of decades: citywide housing plans, green zoning, inclusionary housing. He was instrumental in turning CHPC's work on the building envelope conundrum into zoning for housing, for quality and affordability, which spurred the creation of thousands of affordable units and ushered in a new era of parking policy reform. Few people in New York City have his depth of expertise and experience on housing and land use and planning, and his combination of a creative vision and attention to detail is perfectly suited to CHPC and its work. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage the new Executive Director of CHPC, Howard Slatkin.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to everyone here for coming and supporting CHPC today. I'm Howard Slatkin, Executive Director of CHPC, longtime event guest, first-time host. But for those of you who've been here before, I'd like to welcome you back. For those of you who are just joining us, I am thrilled to introduce you to CHPC. We are not your everyday nonprofit policy research organization dedicated to housing and planning in New York City. Our work looks at policy from the vantage point of buildings, people, and process, and how these all come together. We conduct original research, convene public conversations, and generate detailed policy recommendations. Our goal is not only to propose solutions, but also to build awareness and alignment on the issues, because it's only possible for us to prescribe effective policies if we're all working with the right diagnosis. And our work is creating change. CHPC imported lessons on public housing from the UK and helped place NYCHA residents at the center of challenging but critical decisions about how to deliver the quality of life improvements they deserve. Our Onward and Upward report had laid out a broad agenda of regulatory reforms to advance sustainability, economic recovery, and affordability. These recommendations have helped inform the City of Yes proposals being developed by the Adams administration, and they also show up in the Governor's Housing Compact. I would venture as the topic of the moment. A month ago, one of my first contributions at CHPC was to lay out a three-pronged formula for how state and local government can pull together to unwind our housing crisis rather than further entangle it. The formula lays out how state housing targets, process streamlining, and resources, familiar topics to those of you who are familiar with the compact, are actually perfectly aligned with removing limits on the city's authority to zone for appropriate densities and uses, and to legalize safe basement and cellar apartments. Even if there are still a few details to work out. So please, no one interrupt Ruth Ann if she's on her phone today. It is important. Moving forward, I'm excited to add several new ambitious initiatives to CHPC's agenda. You'll be hearing more from us about these topics. Housing for everyone. If you ask New Yorkers about their housing, the response you get will often be like someone who's wearing two left shoes. It's okay, I can still walk, they'll tell you, but you know it just doesn't quite fit. There are ways that we can create not only more housing, but more kinds of housing and more flexibility for people to make it fit. Keeping house. We have 3.4 million existing units in New York City that need to be maintained in sound condition as well as upgraded to meet new and evolving standards for sustainability and more. How can we enable this both physically and financially? And finally, doing it wrong and doing it better. Many of our processes were devised a long time ago, and for reasons other than meeting our growing need for housing or combating climate change. At CHPC, we'll take a step back and ask what it would look like to build processes that align with our most important goals. But before we get there, I need to wrap up my first big project, which is having a few friends over for lunch. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us honor our great group of awardees.
Thank you, Howard. We've got a very exciting agenda ahead of them at CHPC, and we are going to have a little time here acknowledging a lot of people who've been so instrumental in some significant projects and work throughout the course of the year since we last met. But before we get there, we need to just recognize a couple of key people who have been instrumental to CHPC over the years who are no longer with us. And so let's take a moment to do that. First, Erica Foreman was a creative real estate partner at Brian Cave Law Firm for 4 decades and served as a dedicated CHPC board member for much of that time. Franny McGee was an architect whose strong interest in city planning and affordable housing brought her to CHPC. Beginning as a volunteer, she went on to become our president in the 1960s and 70s. Franny was also a generous donor to CHPC for over 60 years and one of the most influential contributors in our history. The legendary Bob Byrne was a CHPC board member from 1986 to this year when he passed. Among a rich career, he worked predominantly for Milstein Properties. He was also a devoted board member for decades and so generous with his time, imparting his insight about housing development and operation to inform our research. Lisa Blecker died in November as a result of a sudden accident. She was instrumental in raising the visibility of CHPC over the last 10 years by bestowing us with her design and marketing expertise. It was particularly relevant when we did the Making Room and the exhibit at this museum of the city of New York, and also that ultimately went to DC. Through her work at Resource Furniture, and I think the Resource Furniture folks are here, somewhere here up front, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. Through her work at Research Furniture, she partnered with us on a variety of different things and was an extremely important member of our search committee that resulted in us hiring Howard and actually passed right before we finished that process, and we will miss her greatly. So I'd like to ask that we have a moment of silence just to recognize our friends and colleagues.